The warmer weather also means Chicago's Riverwalk is just about ready for business. But could politics put a damper on all the Riverwalk revelry? The owner of one popular riverfront spot says his permit was yanked without explanation, and now he's fighting back. Joining us is Robert Gomez, owner of the Beat Kitchen, which until this year operated along the river. Robert Gomez, thanks for joining us. We should mention you own several other spots, including Subterranean and Beat Kitchen, and then a spot on Navy Pier. So you had this location on the Riverwalk for several years. It was profitable, and then it got taken away from you. What happened?
Well, there was a 5-year lease. We weren't able to operate the first 2 years, and then so we were there for 3 years, and the lease was up, so it was up for renewal. And so they do an application process. So obviously we applied, and it was one other applicant. But this was it was a year ago that this started, and it started late, but it sat locked, shuttered for an entire year without explanation.
It just sat shuttered. You were not allowed to open.
Correct. And
they didn't tell you why?
Well, because the process wasn't. The reality is they weren't ready for the process, and it took way longer than it should have, and so the year just got wasted.
And now they finally did that application process, and from what I understand, they just went with somebody else.
That's correct. They went with the other applicant.
And do you know who that is and why they might have gone that way?
They don't disclose any of that until the deal is signed and delivered, so that there's nothing I can do about it at that point. So I don't know what the issues were, if there were any, because they didn't tell me of any issues prior. And they don't disclose who the other applicant is. They don't disclose who the selection committee is.
Well, we should say there is a selection committee here in the Department of Fleet and Facility Management that determines who gets to go in the Riverwalk.
Correct.
And you're saying you did a Freedom of Information request to find out who's on this committee.
Correct.
What's their criteria, and what did you hear back?
They said they cannot disclose that because they can't disclose who's on the committee out of fear that people would be able to influence those committee members, but they don't tell you how many. We don't know the history, meaning what background do they have to help with this type of analysis. And the most difficult part about it is that there's no oversight. There's no governing body to say if you have a disagreement with their decision. And they don't just decide who goes on the Riverwalk. They decide policies like who gets signage. Like I never got signage even though I appealed. And there's no one to appeal to say, wait a minute, why are we being treated differently? Mm-hmm. There's no governing body to go to and say, can somebody look into this because it doesn't seem right.
All right, well, speaking of governing bodies, that's the paper we just picked up. I did ask the city for a statement on this, and they did say, quote, unfortunately, this applicant was not selected for a renewed concession agreement based on assessment by the evaluation committee. And they say that this is, there we go, the purpose of the RFP process is to ensure that Chicagoans benefit from a competitive bidding process that takes into account a number of factors, so on and so forth. Does this kind of satisfy some of the questions you have?
No, not at all. Why is no one being held accountable for keeping that location closed for a year? I lost the first 2 years. The first year was because they were not ready. And it's just like this process.
How much money does that mean? This was money that you had planned for your business.
Absolutely, and we were ready to go. So we were doing $3 million per year.
And that's just money that you lost?
Yes, but in addition to that, we raised out of that $3 million, we raised money for the city because they get not only sales tax, they get a percentage of our sales, and they get rent. And last year, the city would have gotten $800,000 if that location had been able to open.
I think we have some footage of your spot. Is there anything you think that might have caused them to say, we don't think you're the right owner, the right operator here? Noise, unruly behavior?
I started to speculate because it took a year for them to look at this. I'm like, something's wrong because this is taking way too long. So I called the alderman's office, who immediately responded saying, no, you had no more complaints than anybody else, meaning we had fewer. So I can't piece it together. We did an excellent job. I tripled my projections, what I thought we'd be able to do out of that tiny little patio. We tripled and we matched City Winery's numbers, which is phenomenal given the size of the space that we get to serve into.
I should, the last sentence of this statement they gave me said the city recommended that you schedule a debrief with the project manager for this RFP. Sounds like you've tried to do that. And
of course.
It hasn't worked.
Of course, no. They want to wait until everything's signed and delivered so that there's nothing anyone can do about it. But my point is there's no oversight. Who gets to challenge the decisions that the committee is making? It is subjective. Right? They're going to go through the application and are going to score it. So is that it? One score is higher than the other? What about all this tax revenue that's being lost? Even this year, there's going to be a significant loss.
All right, Robert Gomez, best of luck figuring that situation out. Thanks for coming and joining us. That is our show. But before we go, I want to tell you that we want this show to be a two-way conversation. So send us your thoughts. If you like what you see, don't like what you see, let us know. Email us at parisonpolitics@fox.com. And as always, keep up with all the news you need to know at fox32chicago.com and the Fox local app, where you can watch this show anytime. We will see you next time.